Good morning. My name is Kevin Brandon, and I'm going to speak to you today about Bitcoins and what Bitcoins mean in the year 2018. Simply put, a Bitcoin is the first ever cryptocurrency. Even that definition is a little dense, so I'm going to have an attempt to break it down in this video. When I say decentralized, a Bitcoin is not backed means a Bitcoin is not backed by any government, bank, or authority. It's not even controlled by any private company. The idea is that people all over the globe can exchange currency themselves and do not have to go through any central authority for the transaction. This reduces fees, assessments that you may have to pay. You don't have to pay any of that when dealing with Bitcoins. The inner workings of the blockchain also makes it no government can forcibly seize a citizen's Bitcoins assets without their private key. Every individual is assigned a different private key and is virtually unbreakable unless you give your key out. Bitcoins are all digital, meaning the Bitcoin creations and all transactions occur completely online. There's no paper, no coin, no forms, no currency. Instead, the number of Bitcoins someone has is tracked by something called a digital wallet. Now, earlier I spoke to you about cryptocurrency. While anyone can see a Bitcoin transaction through the public ledger called a blockchain on the Investigate, the total number of Bitcoin someone has, all transaction and holdings are kept anonymous and secured via encryption and cryptography. No person or company names attached to any transaction. You always receive a randomized address. Additionally, each transaction requires a signature to validate the transaction. This signature is composed of a private and public key, and you're the only one that holds the private key. So that's the security part of it. You may say, who invests in Bitcoins? I tell you now, virtually almost everybody. I was surprised. I met a guy on a ski trip over in DC, and this brother name was Bitcoin Rodney. And you can look him up, Bitcoin Rodney. I believe his website is bitcoinrodney.com. And he gave a presentation and he talked about how he bought a $275,000 Lamborghini using Bitcoins. And if you go to his website, it actually shows him using the Bitcoins, well, not using the Bitcoins, it actually shows him at the Lamborghini site talking to the owner of the site, the Lamborghini manufacturer, and talking about how he paid for everything using Bitcoins and how that's the new way that a lot of people are doing anonymous transaction. And, you may say, who invented the Bitcoin? Well, on when was it invented? I would like to say, like in 2009, the Bitcoin was created by one person, or either he had a team of people, and his name was Satoshi Nakamoto. And Nakamoto claims to be the Japanese software creator that has created the Bitcoins. There's no record that ever existed saying that Nakamoto created it, but he's taken fame for it, and he released the paper on Bitcoins back in like 2010 and kind of put everything into the public eye. Now, earlier I spoke to you about how Bitcoin Rodney went in and purchased a Lamborghini, so I'm giving you a little bit of background on how the Bitcoin works. Bitcoin has no physical backing as a currency, and instead it gets its value from the general public decides its worth. Nakamoto designed the currency so that it can cap at a maximum of 21 million Bitcoins, which will probably occur somewhere around the year 2040. It can be assumed that the cap has been implemented to avoid inflation, which a lot of governments are going through now. And because it's not a government-backed currency, this is something that we shouldn't experience when you're dealing with Bitcoins. Physical speaking, Bitcoins operate as a peer-to-peer networking. We talked about that in class as far as like social networking, peer-to-peer, and everything is accessed through via computer. The entire transaction system operates based on a computer code. The general public has access to every transaction and is responsible for validating and verifying the transactions. And this process is called mining, which is incentivized through the creation of a new Bitcoin for the miners. Essentially, mining is a way for people to make sure that no one is overspending Bitcoins. Every 10 minutes, a new block of transaction is added to the blockchain, which is the public ledger. The miners in the network use the computers to solve the complex proof of work algorithms, and the solutions determine whether the blocks start or end and which blocks are valid. Validated transactions are then added to the public ledger. Because there are so many miners and there's no nefarious person can override the system and spend unlimited amounts of bitcoins, and they don't truly have. Miners also produces bitcoins. You can think of mining like minting. When the National Reserve prints money, that's what mining does. It creates new bitcoins. The person's who computers that verifies the latest blocks wins the sums of bitcoins, adding more usable currency to the system. Now you may say, what value does a bitcoin have? The value of a bitcoin is fluctuated wildly over the existence and is recognized as particularly volatile currency. During much of 2010, one bitcoin was worth less than 10 cents. The value has risen as high as $18,000 for one single bitcoin. That's tremendous. And you may say, what can I buy with a bitcoin? I spoke to you earlier about Bitcoin Rodney. Bitcoin Rodney actually purchased a Lamborghini with bitcoins. But today, 100,000 companies that accept bitcoins in forms of payments: Microsoft, Dell, Wikipedia, Reddit, Expedia, Overstock.com, Newegg, which is a technology company. So, and technically speaking, these companies don't accept bitcoins directly, although a patron can use a bitcoin to purchase their goods and services. Companies usually have to use a middleman, like companies like BitPay and Coinbase. And what these companies do, they convert your bitcoins over to the currency or whatever it is of the item that you want to purchase. Besides these purchases, many people prefer to use bitcoins as a form of investment, since they're counting on the value of bitcoins to rise in up and coming years. Because remember, I told you at one time a bitcoin cost 10 cents, and now it's up to 18. It's gone as high as $18,000 for a single bitcoin. Bitcoins in the future is very unstable. If you're thinking about investing in bitcoins or interested in bitcoins, I would tell you to talk to a financial advisor. Bitcoins, like I said, the market has fluctuated and it's very unstable. I hope you have learned a little bit more about bitcoins. I certainly have learned a lot by doing the research for this presentation. And I also would like to end with this disclaimer that this video was prepared to complete a course requirement. The content reflects my knowledge / my view on the topic and does not reflect any views of any other person or entity, more especially the University of Baltimore. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.